So now we're going to make this scale grow as we're tracking the time for a particular activity. And we're gonna make this percentage grow as well. So I'm going to firstly select the time for activity reading. And then on the timeline page, we can start the stopwatch to track the time for this activity. And then on the progress page, the width of this scale should be increasing. And before getting to implementation, let's just do some preparation steps. While generating these activities, I'm going to set up initial time for each of these activities, 15 minutes. So we are generating those activities with the help of generate activities function. And here I'm going to assign 15 minutes to every activity by simply changing this value assigned to seconds to complete property. So we're just multiplying 15 minutes by 60 seconds, and this way we're gonna get value in seconds. And then let's switch over to timeline items module. And inside the function which generate timeline items objects, it is this generate timeline items function, we're going to modify a couple of properties as well. So initially I don't want any of the activities assigned to any timeline item object. So I'm going to basically reset activity IDs as well as activity seconds by assigning appropriate values. And right now, as we can see on the activities page, initially we see that the 15 minutes was assigned to every activity in here, and as for timeline items, we don't actually see that any of the activities were assigned to any timeline item objects. That's what we wanted. So we can start working on the progress. As we know, the component responsible for showing individual progress item called progress item, so let's go inside this component, and right here we're using static values to specify width of scale as well as showing percentage value under the scale. So we have to make this value dynamic so it will update in real time. And for this, I'm firstly going to comment out this line. And now for tracking the progress, we're going to use computed property. Let's write it down in here. And inside the closure of this computed property, we're going to calculate activity seconds that was already tracked for a particular activity. And thankfully, we already have a function which lets us calculate this value. Let's call getTotalActivitySeconds function in here. And when our stopwatch is running, this closure will actually be called every second. So before proceeding any further, let's firstly import all necessary functions, such as getTotalActivitySeconds from timeline items module, as well as function computed from the Vue package. And now let's take a look at the implementation of getTotalActivitySeconds function inside timeline items module. As we can see in here, we're referencing reactive array timeline items. And that means that when our stopwatch is running every second, it is going to update activity seconds property of some timeline item object from this array, which is going to trigger the closure of this computed function. So our progress can be tracked at real time. And now we also have to pass one parameter to getTotalActivitySeconds function. This way we're letting this function know which activity we'd like to calculate activity seconds for. And inside this component we can access activity object via props object, like this. And then we're gonna calculate percentage by using the following expression. Let's multiply received activity seconds value by 100, and the result we're going to divide by the value stored inside seconds to complete property of activity object. So this way we're calculating the percent of already tracked time. And eventually we're going to return calculated percentage from this computed property. And now in the browser, let's just start tracking time for the activity coding and switch over to the progress page. And this time we're supposed to see that the percentage value will be slowly increasing. And this is happening every second. But of course we don't have time to wait until this scale will be fully filled, because it will take around 15 minutes. So what I'm gonna do to speed up this process is actually go inside timeline stopwatch component, and here we're gonna create temporary constant, let's call it temp, and store in here value of seconds in 2 minutes, so 120 seconds. And now instead of adding 1 second to activity seconds property every second, we're going to increase this time by 2 minutes by adding our value of constant temp. And the same thing we're going to do in the reset function. In here we're going to multiply seconds by value of constant temp. But of course, this is only for testing purposes. Later, we're gonna remove this constant. And now once again, let's start tracking time for the activity coding. And this time, on the activities page, we will see that the time is decreasing much faster now. So every second, it's decreasing by 2 minutes. And of course, our scale starts filling in much faster. But when I increase the time for this coding activity, let's say 3 hours, the scale will be growing slower, because now it takes much more time to complete this activity. Next, we're gonna fix percentage representation, because this value needs to be rounded. So let's go back to progress item component, and right here, we're gonna wrap this percentage value within function call floor to round the value. Or actually, we can apply this floor function to this whole expression and return it right away to avoid creating intermediate variable. We can also refactor this code a little bit by moving this whole logic to calculate this percentage into its own function inside activities module. So right here, I'm going to export new function with a name getActivityProgress, which is going to take one parameter, which will be activity object. And in here, we can reference activity object directly without using props. And now let's just move the import of getActivitySeconds function from progress item component into this activities module. And instead, what we should import inside progress item component is our new function getActivityProgress. Let's write this import. And now instead of using all this logic in this closure, we can simply delegate all the work to our new function getActivityProgress, which is going to calculate percentage value for us. So before going to the browser, let's just fix import paths for this function. We should use one dot in here, and just to make the code inside the ActivityProgress function more readable, we can replace this numeric value 100 by the constant. Let's call this constant 100%. And right away we're gonna import this constant from our constants module up here. And then we need to declare this function inside constants module. So I'm going to add a new declaration at the very end of this file for the constant 100%. And the value will be, of course, 100. And also we can turn the logic inside the getActivityProgress function into a one-liner by removing ActivitySeconds variable and instead using getTotalActivitySeconds function called directly in this expression, like so. And now one final check before actually finishing this lesson. Let's just repeat the same actions and start tracking the time for the coding activity and make sure that on the progress page, our scale is properly growing. So everything is working. And one final touch is to actually remove previously commented code inside progress item component. It is this line. Let's remove it. And on that, we are finishing this lesson.